I grew up in a household of 8 kids and 3 adults, and Dad was a deacon and the treasurer of his small holiness church. So I grew up in a household of faith, we call it of faith. And Dad was also a very active union organizer, and he was the president of the first integrated railroad union. He was in the dining cars. He worked in commissary. So I come to activism from the faith perspective, but also from the strong union. And both my parents were very active in community work. Dad was the first male to head the local PTA. So it's in my blood. I think it was in the blood of all of the children, but I think I'm the one who took it, far and have really maintained it.
That's quite a story. So, what was your first? So, did you sing in your church and help?
No, we were there as kids. We grew up there. My mom belonged to another church, Pentecostal, so we would go back and forth between the two churches. I did. My sister and I used to sing. I did, as I got older, some organizing work around setting up junior programming. But I would say that because Dad, although he was a deacon, he was the treasurer. So he spent a large portion of the service in the fiscal office. And maybe it saved us because we were not raised with like this strong, overpowering religion. He always said to us, church belongs in the community. The role of the Bible tells us to take care of our neighbors. So we got a very strong sense of your church being committed to and in the community, and his church was. And also the sense of family. We were raised in the church as though we were children of the church.
Mhm. And so, did that stay with you in each part of your life as you were growing up and deciding what to do and how to be in the world?
Yes, and in my early college years, as is often the case, I rejected all of it. And I still was an activist, and I would call myself, I was a socialist, I was a communist, I was a social welfare person. It was after, I would say, probably in about 2002 that I began to understand as I matured. You're not getting, I would say, I said to myself, you're not getting these values from these political agendas and organizations. You're getting them from your faith.
Hmm. Interesting. So, you did a lot of political work, but somehow it wasn't meeting your need to
Yeah, because I
help
think
your community?
as a we grew up in Harlem, with the Communist Party and with the Socialist Party, and you may recall those were active, legitimate parties in New
Hmm.
York City. But that ideology rests in an institutional context. So you've got all the issues, problems of that institutional fabric. So, those were things that turned off many of us in the Black community and myself also, so I looked other places to try to find my foundation for the social justice work that I would do.
So, what did you turn to first?
Well, I went for many years with no foundation. My partner and I used to call ourselves socialists, and until she died, I guess we were socialists. but never entrenched in the organizational structure of the party.
So the socialism was a belief in what our society needed to do to help
Yes, yes.
its
And
weakest members.
we had gone to Cuba and she had gone to Nicaragua. So we had some, some reality in what we believed, but we never were part of the organized party.
And then after she died is when you
Turned to my
moved.
faith
Uh-huh.
to to get me through the grieving. Very, very bad. We had been together 30 years, so it was a great loss. I decided that I needed to hold on to something and some structure, some beliefs, if I were to continue to be able to function or continue to live. And I turned to the church, and I joined at that time Riverside Church, became very active in the ministries there. And I'm no longer there, but it held me and it gave me comfort and it gave me a foundation for the continued work that I would do. And now I consider that I am an activist, LGBTQIA activist of faith, working in that community, particularly in the Black portion of the community.
Is that's a challenge, right? Is so
Yes.
when tell us what when you first came to Riverside, what were you most engaged with?
Well, Riverside has always had, it was one of the first non gay churches to have an LGBT ministry. So, and that was one of the reasons why I did go. Uh, I became very active in that ministry. I became the convener of that ministry and also involved myself in the social justice ministry. Uh, I was there maybe 4 or 5 years, I'm not certain. But while I was there, one of the large LGBT, I'm going to not say the whole abbreviation, the LGBT organization invited me to work with them. They had a particular faith group and they provided me with the resource to organize other faith leaders of color because they did not have color in the organization. And I organized a group, Black and Latinos. And after some time, we decided that if we were going to be effective in the Black community and the Latino community, we could not enter with marriage equality as the first agenda. And the particular organization, that was their agenda. In fact, once marriage equality was granted, they actually dissolved. So we went off and formed an independent organization. I became the convener and they just retired me, founder emeritus. It was called the LGBT Faith Leaders of African Descent. And our primary objective was to organize, educate, and advocate for the rights of our community within the Black community, and particularly in the religious community. And I was there 13 years, I think. They still function.
And do you think um, is one of the issues that people who are um, not traditionally oriented in terms of their sexuality are don't can't find a place in their churches, and that's what you're working
That is,
on?
that is the case for many. And we made a strong effort in the larger LGBT community to really point out that although the Black Latino community are often described as the most homophobic, we are in fact not. Uh, but I think that Well, I know what we did is made the decision because all of the members belong to different denominations, different faith beliefs, faith journeys, but we were all out as LGBT. We made the decision that we would not ask people to leave their churches because remember, for many of us, the church has always been the anchor of the family, so that you're talking about generation of people belonging to that church. And it's not only their church, it is their life subsistence. So we made a decision early on that we could not ask them to leave the church, but we would say to them, if you're going to stay and be subject to a constant attack on who you are as a person, what we want to do is give you the tools to be able to fight back. So that became our strong objective. And then the other major part of our work was to reach out into the larger Black community and do education. We would do workshops. We had for 3 years a major bus stop campaign uh, with, with the bus stops, where we put affirming messages, and we had them throughout the Bronx, the Brooklyn, and Manhattan, in areas that we had identified from the census were largely Black concentrated areas. And those were very, very effective. We had people tell us we never expected to see anything like that in Harlem. Visitors contacted us, and the company told us that we had over thousands and thousands of viewers. I guess the companies, in order to sell and market that space, we had to pay for the space. They have some kind of pins in there so that they can tell how many views. And so they told us we had an enormous, enormous amount of views. I don't recall the number, but it surprised us. So, so we did that 3 years. Then we would give public visibility to artists, and many of them LGBT, who had used that experience of being isolated or rejected to make statements in their artwork, books, theater, poetry. What we would do is we would give them an opportunity to reach movies also, to reach audiences. So we would sponsor them and their work in public events. We did newspaper articles. I did several newspaper articles. We went and spoke on panels. Whoever would invite us to speak, we were there. We also participated in I think it's called the African Day Parade that was held in Harlem. We didn't know how we would be received, but we were well received. Uh, so we did a variety of things, always to send a message. We are here as Black LGBT people. We are part of your community. You have to accept us. We are your children. We are your sisters, brothers. We are here. You can't ignore us any longer. I don't say, I can't prove objectively that we made a difference, but I will say that no Black clergy from the time, at least I know I was working in the community, would dare to come out and say any horrific homosexual uh, statement. And I got articles and also letters in the Black press, several of them. So I think we made a substantial difference. The other way I judge, unfortunately, without any real qualitative research, uh, we, I forgot what I was going to say. let me say, let me say this first. I judge our effectiveness also, or our non-effectiveness, on the fact that the number of homeless LGBT kids does not go down. And the largest percentage of those kids are Black and Latino. That was another point we wanted to make because we felt that the number of homeless youth were being all clumped together. And as long as they were clumped together, and the fact that that figure for Black and Latinos was high, like over 50%, we would never be able to show our community this is what is happening to our kids, right? And we did interviews with those kids. We did oral interviews that went on our websites. And again and again and again, we were told they were put out of their houses because of religious beliefs.
Because of religious
Yes, you could say
beliefs.
that that was at the foundation. In fact, if you talk to people, Black, Latino, or white community, today I just heard someone speak of this. It always comes down to the religion. Whether it is explicit, it implicitly, somebody's using the scriptures to say that we are, demons or whatever the case may be. And this is across all the communities.
So you're saying that all these homeless youth, the LGBT youth, really their rejection by their families stemmed from religious.
Yes. Whether it's articulated, but when you take back all the covering and all the, things that parents will say, like, I'm afraid you will get AIDS, or I'm afraid, you'll get beat up. When you take away all of that, that in the public arena is the most polite thing to say, you will find this religion thing underneath.
So even though it's not being preached out loud, it's somehow being used
Yes.
against the kids. When you said that you gave them tools to stay in the church, even if the church was not very welcoming, can you talk
Well,
about that a
for
little bit?
instance, there are a group of scriptures that are called the Clara scriptures. They are all, I'm not a clergy person, they are always used against people who identify as LGBT. We reverse that, okay? They are using that against you. Here are some that said God or Jesus or Allah has taught to embrace all people, right? And to treat everyone as you would want to be treated, or treat them like a brother or like a sister. So it was that kind of giving them that information. And it was also saying to them, you are worthy, to hear that alternative message from us. We
Mm-hmm.
never encouraged anyone to come out because there's always the question of safety, number one. And then you can't rip people away from their families. That is a choice that they have to make for themselves. And they have to be prepared to do that. And they have to be uh, able to have the information and the tools to allow their parents, if they are going to and if they are willing, to learn and to come along with them. So we had some fun. The other thing is we would never attack a church, because we felt that if we wanted to, we had many strategies we thought of, but we felt that if we went out in our community starting to attack people, that would be the end of it. So we never attacked. And then we were all people of faith, so we all have, in us, we may have the negative we get from the churches, but we also have in us, love your neighbor, and respect the other person. So that was fundamental to the way in which we operated in the community. We did have meeting with clergies. I participated in those primarily, myself and another member. We invited them to private luncheons where they could discuss with us the problems they had in bringing any of this to their church. And we talked to them about how that could be done. And also because we were in a private setting, because many of the clergy cannot afford, at that point, could not afford to be seen public,
Hmm.
advocating anything that looked like marriage equality or LGBT rights. But within the confines of our luncheon meeting, we could challenge them, and we did. And we had several uh, uh, meetings with clergy. Um, Two in the community. One was at the Union Theological Seminary. And
Hmm.
that's the other thing. I'm a former faculty of social work. Uh, and one other person with us had also been a teacher somewhere. So we organized a course for Union Theological Seminary. And, because I know the academic system, we got the course approved. So we taught two electives. The subject was how to teach in the Black community, you know, ideas around LGBT acceptance.
That, that's it's
But
so
so,
impressive.
as I reflect on it, we did a lot. Never enough. Oh, I know what I was going to say, but I was talking about how we measure ourselves. Uh, One of the things I will say is when we started, I'm not going to say we were the first organization to do this, but when we started, there wasn't anybody else doing it.
Hmm.
Now it's probably almost impossible to find a Black LGBT organization that does not have and address faith in some way, whether it's in a conference, a
Yeah.
workshop. So I think that we made it okay to talk about this out loud. The secret, no, it's no longer a secret.
That's a huge improvement, I would think. Um, I want to ask you one more thing. Do you have advice to give the younger generation of activists who might be on a similar path in some way?
I would say this is an interesting question because I just decided last year, I guess I was stuck in and feeling sort of isolated. One of the LGBT organizations asked me to be on the advisory board. This is a statewide organization. And I noticed that they had a labor group, but they did not have a faith group. So I said, well, I'll be on your board if you allow me to organize a faith group. So I've been doing that. And I realize how hard that is to do. Uh, so let me answer your question with that as a background. You cannot get in this work, and I will say to them, unless you're passionate about what you want to do. You have to bring to it a foundation of principles, some solid rock on which you stand as a person. And you have to always be in the process of evaluating yourself. Are you living by those principles? Or have you gotten caught in being a star or in being the all for everyone? So I would say you must have a foundation and also the passion to do this work. It is hard work, hard work. It means round. I've been using the word, a derogatory word to say, I didn't realize how hard it is to herd people. It's hard. You've got to keep people's interest. You've got to keep them connected to the project. You've got to uh, help them see that this is a priority of their time and of their skills. Uh, because the people you work with, many of them will be busy people for different reasons. They have to be able to feel from you that this is the most important work that they can do. And then I see this in some of the young people coming along. You don't get thank you for this, and you're lucky if you do. You're fortunate if you do. Uh, and you're not doing it for that reason. You're doing it because you believe it must be done, and you are the person to do it. It's like a calling. In the church, they talk about a calling. It's like a calling. If you are the kind of person that needs to have someone tell you how great you are, how wonderful, how it it it, it ain't gonna happen. You're lucky if you get it, right? So that I think is very, very important. And then the other thing is you have to have your own head on straight. I mean, you can't be bringing all your issues to the work you're doing. So if it takes you need therapy, if it takes you need counseling, you can't bring your issues to the work that you're doing.
Mhm.
Uh, and then I think it's important if you're working with people or in a community where you feel that you have an affiliation. Okay, so I'm not going down to Texas to organize, for instance. I'm organizing in the community that I know and that I appreciate and respect. Uh,
Huh. That's wonderful. Um, I can ask.
let me follow up that. I taught social work, graduate and undergraduate students. And those are people that we would say come with an extraordinary kind of value to want to help people.
Mhm.
But I would ask them, but what do you believe about people? What do you believe? And I tell you, I taught, I left early. it was too, it wasn't active enough for me. Uh, Maybe 6 years. And I did not find one person that could answer that question. So
I,
for me, if you're going to do this work, you must know why you're in it. As the kids would say, what's the skin? What do they say? What's the skin in the game for
right.
you?
What's your skin in the
Yeah,
game?
what's your skin in the
Exactly.
game?
Yeah.
And if you don't know that, I would say you have no business out there. Now that's not a constant thing that that you get and you keep it for life. My partner and I used to always say, why are we doing this? Are we sure we're doing this for the right thing? And we would sort of make sure we're evaluating ourselves. So it's not something that you tie up and it's solid, but it is, you have to have wrestle and continue to wrestle with. What do you believe? What do you believe about people? How do you uh, make sense of the society that we have created? What about the issues that we face, the problems that we face? How do you make sense of that? Because those are the things. You have your skills and all of that, but that's the self you bring to the work you're going to do.